Think we're on?
I think we're on.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
We are Liz Solms
And Marie McCormick
of Inside Partners. And we're really happy to be talking with you today, to be sharing our story, our case study. And in Truth in Advertising, this is our first Google Hangout Online. So we're a little bit unclear how many people are out there or who's out there or if anyone's out there. So if anybody would like to help us out, just there's a little spot where you can ask questions. Just say hi, and that will tell us, we can see if folks are there. So feel free to do that. Oh, hello, yay, thank you, Jim. So we know at least one person's there. So we'll get started.
It's the Q&A on the left-hand side you press in order to be able to ask a question.
So our case study today our story is about using Theory U for collective impact in the Georgia education state ecosystem. So there's two purposes to the story that we're telling you today. One is that we want to tell you a story about building a social ecosystem where you have a lot of people in a state like the state of Georgia. For those, if there are folks on the call who are not from the United States, Georgia is one of the 50 states. It's in the southern part of our country. It's a rural state, but it has a big city of Atlanta. And so this story is about getting a lot of people in one big geography all on the same page on a very complex issue so they could shift a system. So it's about that, about this larger ecosystem. And also in our story, we are going to drill down on one aspect of this initiative where called, in a minute I'll show you a map of all the different components, but one aspect of our story is about how we got everyone in the state of Georgia to agree on a single theory of change toward the goal of every child reading on grade level. So I see some people are joining, some people are asking if this is happening. I hope we have Lily in the background making sure things are happening, hoping everybody's be able to see us. So it'll be a story of a whole social ecosystem, but then we'll tell the how of one of the key aspects. As Theory U practitioners, Marie and I have been using Theory U for about 9 years now. And we know in the gatherings of Theory U folks that one of the big curiosities is the how question. How, I love the framework, love the methodology, but how do you use it? So we'll tell that story as well, one component of the how. So just a minute about us. Marie and I are part of a very small firm. It's us, and we bring in colleagues here and there called Inside Partners. And we've been together doing our work for about 12 years. About 8 years ago, we've been doing a lot of large group whole system work. So a lot of meetings where we have the whole system in the room to address questions of consequence. So we had a lot of experience with large group dialogue and with getting whole system engagement. But we got to a point about 9 years ago where we got a little tired of ourselves. And we started feeling like, we're saying the same things all the time, and we know we can get deeper with our clients. We're consultants. And so we took a little break. We said we were at our personal limit. We were tired and confused and not sure of how to get deeper. So we took a sabbatical, and each of us we also had young children, both of us. We each have our own families. And we took a sabbatical and took a meditation class and said to ourselves, if we could do for systems what meditation does for individuals, that would be something. That would be a real impact. So we followed those breadcrumbs, and we found Otto online. He hadn't published his first book yet, and he was about to convene his first workshop. So this is about 8 or 9 years ago. I went to the first workshop on Theory U. So this is where I'm going to use my Google on-air skills and switch over.
Which are newly found
skills, and switch over to a little picture that I want to show you, which is right here. And this picture shows you, gives you a visual image of the work that we've been doing in Georgia. So you can see that there's many different initiatives we've been involved in, and they are of different sorts. So the brown circle projects are things we've been involved in that are kind of one-off. You know, they were mostly for strategic planning work, and sometimes leadership development work. This work led to these 3 big blue boxes. Those blue boxes are major collective impact projects, all focused on the goal of every child reading on grade level by 3rd grade. For those of you who don't know this, if you can't read by 3rd grade, then your likelihood of either dropping out of school or, this is the sad part, the prison planners in the United States use 3rd grade reading as a predictor for prison population. If you can't read by 3rd grade, the odds of you having a tough life are very high. The percentage of children who could read on grade level in 3rd grade in Georgia right now is, drumroll, 30%. It's really low. So these 3 initiatives, the 3 boxes that you see, the blue boxes, are projects that are focused on getting everyone on the same page toward that one goal of every child reading on grade level in the state of Georgia. The red circles are prototypes that have very big prototypes that have come out of these initiatives. So that's what our little map shows. So I'm going to start back to my story of having gone to Otto's first workshop. It was in Western Massachusetts on Theory U. Marie and I went. We were there for 3 days, and we came out of there and we're like, wow, that really blew our minds, and how the heck do you apply it? Now, it turned out that 2 days following this, or two weeks following this, we were going to be going down to Atlanta. Both of us live in Philadelphia. We live in a completely different city, or different state, to do strategic planning for, you see that first circle, Camp Twin Lakes. Camp Twin Lakes is a camp, a very special place in Atlanta for children with special needs. So there's a week of camp for children with cancer, a week of camp for children with diabetes, a week of camp for children with a history of sexual assault. All the, lots of different kinds of camps for children with different life challenges. We were called down to do strategic planning. We're about to go down there, and we said, hey, we'll do this, but will you do Theory U with us? Will you play with us? And they were very game, very innovative people, and said, sure, if that's what it's going to take to get you guys down here, we'll do it. The other thing about Camp Twin Lakes is it attracted, it was a very kind of sexy board to be part of. It attracted a lot of high-powered people in Atlanta, and a lot of people with a very strong sense of stewardship for children. So these were children who had a lot of, these were board members with a lot of prestige, but also a very high commitment to children. So we did the first round of strategic planning with Camp Twin Lakes, modified the approach we usually used in a couple of ways, including we added learning journeys. So before we got to the decision-making meeting for Camp Twin Lakes, people went on 15 learning journeys. We did interviews with people. We did several things that come out of Theory. I'm not going to talk about that in detail. And ended up with a strategic plan that everyone described as a sea change. It felt like something very different that enabled a lot of possibility. We, at this point, Marie and I had made a decision in our little consulting firm that we were going to be not just consultants who help people do good work, but trusted partners for the people that we were focused with. So, so what we did was we did something that we didn't normally do, which we really made a point to stay in touch with folks who are part of this strategic planning work, including the executive director, and who called us back 5 years later. So nothing else happened in Atlanta for us for 5 more years. 5 years later, Marie and I had gone through the master class. It's the 2-year master class that Otto put on, called our friends at Camp Twin Lakes and said, if you ever want to do leadership development, we're your people. And they said, we don't know about that, but we need another strategic plan. Can you use Theory U, but differently? Came back, did Theory U again differently. I'm not going to tell you the details of that, but within 2 weeks of that plan being affirmed, they got $1 million out of nowhere for this strategic planning work, because it was just so resonant. So many people were behind it. Now at this point, we became close with a guy by the name of Comer Yates. Comer was on the board of Camp Twin Lakes, and he identified us as a group of consultants who could help him really think differently about possibilities, who could learn from the future as opposed to from the past, and who could access this open heart and using the idea of bringing your whole self to work. He was in the middle. He ran a school called the Atlanta Speech School, and he was a known personality in Georgia in terms of his advocacy for children. He's very vocal, strong advocate, a lawyer, high profile, committed to children, had convinced the state of Georgia that the single goal of every child reading on grade level by 3rd grade was something that the entire state should work for. So I'm going to show you a picture of Comer. There's Comer up on the left side. Comer called us, just randomly. Like, we weren't hired by him, but he kept calling us and said, help me think this through. How would we do this differently? How could we get our state organized around this theme? So, long story short, we're finished with Camp Twin Lakes, 2nd round of strategic planning. And at Comer School, there are, it's actually 5 schools in one. And the focus area of one of the schools is children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Children who are deaf and hard of hearing are more likely to be Latino, of Hispanic origin. At least in the United States, that's the case. And by this time, the governor of the state of Georgia had said, you know what, that's going to be our single goal, every child reading on grade level by 3rd grade. Now, Georgia is a very conservative state. It's not known for focusing on education, but it had a goal of trading with all of South America. So in order to trade with all of South America, it couldn't very well do that when only 30% of its children were reading on grade level. So the governor suddenly was behind the school, and the Casey Foundation, which is a big foundation in the United States, it's from UPS money. UPS, the package delivery service, happens to be based in Atlanta. So the Casey Foundation also had a big presence in Atlanta, which is the biggest city in Georgia. So there was enough energy mobilized that everyone said, you know what? And the Chamber of Commerce got behind it. Suddenly, all of the leaders in the state of Georgia said, this is our goal. Let's figure out how to get there. Well, meanwhile, Comer, back at the Atlanta Speech School, is trying to figure out how are we going to get all the children who are English learners, whose families don't speak English, to be on reading on grade level. And he had a lot of expertise in his school, people who were experts in dual language learners, but he was not getting any traction because he didn't know how to mobilize a whole state. So he had seen us over at Camp Twin Lakes, saw how we can get a lot of people, hundreds of people behind one vision. And he said, come on out to, please help me with my English learners, with this English Learner Coalition. I need to get we need a plan where the entire state has a common agenda for getting English learners reading on grade level. So, as part of this work, one of the things that we do is we do dialogue interviews at the beginning of our work. So we had identified a leadership team, and among the people on this leadership team for the Georgia Coalition for English Learners was this woman named Ariane Weldon. Ariane Weldon, her job was she was the leader of the entire statewide effort to get Georgia reading. It's called Get Georgia Reading. We interviewed her, asked her a lot about herself, asked her about where she got her deeper insights, had a long interview with her, and long before you knew it, like within a week, we got a request from her organization to build a theory of change for all of Georgia around getting every child reading on grade level. As it turned out, we didn't even understand. We said, sure, well, we didn't even know what she was talking about. But we sent a letter explaining the kinds of outcomes we were accustomed to getting with folks, and we talked about Theory U. And never expecting to get this work. Well, what happened was 2 weeks later we got a call, and folks said, you're on. You're going to help us build a statewide theory of change for all of children, because what they said was yours was the only proposal where we actually learned something. So I'm going back to where we actually learned something. So in a minute, Maria is going to talk more about this orange, the blue with the orange slide called Get Georgia Reading. But what I want to tell you from about that before we go to that, so back on the Georgia Coalition for English Learners, one of the other things that happened there was we realized that no single organization could mobilize on behalf of English learners, that we needed a collaboration across a lot of different people. So we found a framework out of an organization called FSG. It's based in Boston, and they've done a lot of research and writing on collective impact. So we brought that collective impact knowledge into the Theory U project. There's a lot of information online about that if anybody wants to look it up. But most importantly, our concern was we needed to be funded in a way where it was not one organization funded to mobilize on behalf of English learners, but many. At this point, I'm going to point you to this woman down at the bottom named Katrina Mitchell. She worked for the Atlanta Community Fund, the United Way of Atlanta, and she whispered in our ears, don't spend a lot of effort looking for funding for collective impact. I can't say more, but there will be an opportunity in a few months. So we trusted her, didn't say anything, and continued on with our work. Part of what came out of the work with Get Georgia Reading was one of the things we did was pull together a lot of people, 100 people from across the state, folks who were involved in early childhood education, public health, the private sector, scholastic, textbooks, all sorts of people. We knew we needed to bring them in one setting and have them learn from one another. And Marie will tell you more about that, but I want to mention one person. Her name is Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald. So as part of this work of building a social ecosystem, what the message I'm trying to get across is paying attention to where the leadership and the energy is. Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald is the Commissioner of Public Health for the state of Georgia. So education is not even in her realm. She's the chief medical officer. But very early on, she realized the close links between education outcomes and health outcomes. And she came to a day of TED-like talks that we did. And she spoke about the mind-body connection. Because remember, we're doing mindfulness here, and suddenly it's an education setting, and a chief medical officer is doing a TED talk on the mind-body connection. So we knew quickly that she was an amazing champion because she's responsible for the babies of Georgia. So long story short, I'm moving now to this part at the left, the next box to the left, Georgia Pathway for Language and Learning. Meanwhile, we got invited to the same kind of network across the state of Georgia for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. And in that network, it's no need to go into the whole story, just to know it had been focused mainly on education professionals. And people were moaning and groaning. There's no way we can get the health leaders involved in this issue. And that's what we need. Children who are born deaf and hard of hearing, if they don't get access to language in their first year of life, they are forever unable to communicate. It's a special requirement. Well, we knew that Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who's down here, there she is, in all her glory, we knew that she would be a champion if she were invited to this meeting on deaf and hard of hearing children. So sure enough, she came and was part of our beginning mobilization around deaf and hard of hearing children, and she did something phenomenal at that meeting. She was an invited guest. She sat during 2 days of listening to all sorts of dialogue around deaf and hard of hearing children. And at the end of the meeting, she stood up and she said, "My commitment to all of you is the next 100 children born deaf or hard of hearing in the state of Georgia, we will have a birth to literacy plan for them. And we promise you that every child will be able to read on grade level by 3rd grade." So this was the beginning of a prototype that was called the 100 Babies Project that you can see right there, that is still going on today. So what's going on with that is we're using every child as a test case for this initiative for deaf and hard of hearing children, so we can build out a system where I'm going to stop the screen. So we can build out a system whereby all children who are born deaf and hard of hearing will be able to read on grade level. So that was the 100 Babies project. A couple of other things to say. Out of this work, 2 other huge prototypes have emerged. One is this one called Talk With Me Baby. So a big insight of everyone throughout Georgia was that that you can't start in kindergarten, which is where American education, the education system begins. You have to start not in early childhood, but at birth. That the gap between children with access to resources and without access to resources is revealed at 18 months of age. So children who have access to language at 18 months of age have at 3 years of age, have a vocabulary of about 3,000 words. At 3 years of age, children without access to the right kinds of resources have a vocabulary of about 1,500 words. So we knew we had to start super young. And the tricky part in all of this work was how do we get families engaged? Because families, that's where it all begins. So Talk With Me Baby is a prototype that came out of the grade level reading campaign, where we're training the entire nursing workforce of the state of Georgia to coach parents when babies are born to talk with their babies, to have conversational exchange with their babies. This initiative is not, thinking that it's important to talk with babies is not new. But this initiative of training an entire workforce of nurses is new. And in fact, President Obama has been talking about it. So that's the Talk With Me Baby initiative. Another prototype that came out of this work was with Georgia State. We did a hackathon where we got the tech people to listen to our challenges. And we have apps that are being developed to support parents at home to talk with their babies and count language. The other boxes that I showed you in our screen refer to other initiatives that have come out of this. We're doing Theory U work with a network of 15 early childhood providers in the poorest neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta. We're doing work with the Department of Public Health around the whole epidemiology function, work with the only funder of deaf and hard of hearing children in the country. And my point in saying all this is by following the trail of champions statewide who understand Theory U and who understand this theory of change that Maria will explain to you for grade level reading, we've gotten to the point where we have finally what feels like a social ecosystem, where we have leaders in all sectors who are operating with the same shifts of mind and the same framework around using Theory U as a frame for change. So I want to say, I forgot to say this up front, that if you have questions as we're going along, to put them, to type them in, and we'll try to address them as we're talking. So Marie.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be with you today. Liz and I, the way we split up this presentation is that Liz wanted to give the big picture of building the ecosystem and all the different projects and prototypes, etc. And now we know that people are really interested in the actual process to follow, to use Theory U to help either an individual organization or a group of organizations. So I am now going to do a deep dive on the process that we used with the Get Georgia Reading campaign that Liz mentioned. Before I do that, I want to say, number one, that while my focus will be on the process and we'll talk about some outcomes along the way, that all along the way, the idea that this is Theory U, and that while we were collecting data, etc., we were also always tying in reflection and deep thought and exploration and movement, so that while my focus, I'm going to say we did this and we did this and we did this, please know that along the way, both the process of Theory U and the spirit of Theory U was very much a part of it. So I'm going to ask Liz to put up the first slide. And this slide will be an outline of, keep going, will be an outline of the process that we use for Get Georgia Reading. So I know that this shape looks familiar to you all, and this is the U shape. And our process follows the U. It follows the U when we're doing collective impact. It follows the U when we're doing strategic planning. It follows the U when we're doing leadership development, etc. And so like all Theory U processes, it starts with co-initiating, moves into co-sensing, goes into co-presencing, and then finally realizing, which includes prototyping and embedding in the system. So I want to go into each one of these in a little bit of depth. So starting with co-initiating, let me point out one other thing. You can see that this is color-coded. So Liz and I almost always work with different levels of teams when we're working with an organization or a group of organization. One is a core team, which is a couple of people. Usually if it's an organization, the leader of the organization and one or two other people. We are in constant communication with them throughout the process. I should also say that the processes are typically 6 months to a year, so that we build a very close relationship. That partnership that Liz is talking about becomes very strong. So the core team. The second is a leadership team. The leadership team in the case of Get Georgia Reading was about 15 people. It was the Commissioner of Public Health that Liz mentioned and Ariane that Liz mentioned from the project director for Get Georgia Reading. It was Comer Yates who Liz mentioned. Also leaders from DECAL, from the Chamber of Commerce, and a number of nonprofits, United Way, foundations, etc. And so we conducted dialogue interviews with these 15 leaders, which is certainly we gather data as we're doing these interviews, but that is not the primary purpose of them, but rather it's to build rapport and it's to deeply connect the leaders with the task and the mission at hand and have them co-create what our work will be. So that is the green, the interviews, which we did with the leadership team. The next thing we did in co-initiating was we said, who else do we need here? And we pulled together and this is the third group, a vision team or statewide coalition. And at this convening meeting, there were the first one, about 50 people. And one of the things that we did at this co-initiating meeting was to develop a mind map. That's a graphic way to capture ideas, capture and categorize ideas. And the question around that mind map was, what would you have to believe to imagine every child in Georgia reading at reading proficiency level by the end of 3rd grade? And there were many, many things that came out of that, and just a couple. That is a picture. Liz is showing a picture of the mind map. So there were many, many things that came out of that. A couple that I want to point out is that one person in a very from the heart sort of way talked about that we really needed collaboration, real collaboration, in a different way than had been seen in the past. It wasn't just about working together, but on a much deeper level of figuring out together how we would accomplish the goal and serving each other in the goal. A second one was that the issue was brought up about budget and finance, that if we're going to be realistic, to pull this off, there couldn't be the fighting about dollars, but rather a collective budget that would serve to help implement the work that would be done together. So that was our convening meeting. We came out with that with really a task at hand. Remembering that the bottom line of all this was, as Liz had said, we were hired to develop a theory of change to get to this goal, the 2020 goal we call it. And I think when the RFP was originally put out, I think the initiators of the RFP thought that perhaps they'd be hiring education experts who would on their own develop a theory of change or bring a few smart people in a room to do that. But instead we said, no, this theory of change has got to be developed collaboratively with the whole system, the people that we've mentioned. So after co-initiating this work, we moved into the co-sensing phase. And we did something here to kick it off that was really something we had never done before, and we call it an innovation forum, and it was really well received and really different. The challenge was that everybody was seeing pieces of the solution. Everybody had a different lens that they saw in this, but there wasn't a shared understanding of the whole or looking at it from different perspectives. So the 50 people grew into about 100 people, and we had a day-long what we called Innovation Forum, which was a series, about 20 of TED-like talks, short talks, very animated talks. But what made this a little different was that not only were the presenters sharing, but after a set of, let's say, 3 or 4 presentations, people were sitting in mixed groups and would have conversation about what they were hearing that could connect the dots and begin to bring into focus what some of the elements of the theory of change might be. So at this point now, we have 100 people in the process. Another part of that day was that we began to name learning journeys that we would want to embark on as a team. And I'm going to make the assumption that everybody knows what a learning journey is. A learning journey and immersion experiences. So Liz and I distinguish 2 types of these journeys, of sensing journeys. Learning journeys are those journeys when we have a particular question that as a group we want to go out, or small groups, go out and explore, observe, observe, observe. And sometimes these are in our sector that we're working in, and sometimes they're out of the sector. Whereas an immersion experience is sinking into the system. So going out and visiting edges of the system and various parts of the system to really see the system in all of its beauty. So we conducted something like, the group went on something like 20 learning journeys over a period of a few months. And some of these learning journeys, just to give you a sample of what some of the learning journeys were, there is a school district in Georgia that focuses from birth through high school and has had tremendous results in terms of reading and also high school graduation. So a group of people went out to, it's called Athens Clark School District. Another group, because the question was, how do we have a seamless handoff between grades and between schools? They went to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta to see, like, because chronic disease requires this sort of handout, well, what are the elements of really a seamless handoff between pieces of a system? We also went to Refugee Family Services to explore the particular challenges of dual language learners. And one more I want to point out, the leadership team, those 15 people we talked about in the beginning, we had one learning journey that was just open to the leadership team so that they could make sense of this together. And they went to the Georgia Tech Center for Health and Humanitarian Logistics, and they were looking at the issue of access. So how do we make sure that every child in Georgia has access to what they need? A few big shifts and learning from these were, from all of the learning journeys, were that the early years, the birth through when kids get into school, that needed a big focus. Also, that because of poverty, we really had to put a focus and a light on poverty and not pretend that it didn't exist and not pretend that it didn't have a huge impact on access and other issues. And a third was universal design, that we had to design not for some imaginary child, but for all children, whether it be dual language learners, whether it be deaf and hard of hearing. If we designed at the edges, we'd be designing for all children. So that was our learning journey and immersion experience. We then had a meeting with the leadership team where we made sense of all that we were learning. And from that, we all along were developing a theory of change. And at that sense-making meeting, Liz and I and the core team had pulled together a draft theory of change, and we shared it with now this larger group and of the leadership team. And basically they said, parts of it are fine, parts of it are really way off. but it was a big, big turning point. And you can see Liz has it up on the screen. This isn't the actual one. There were many. I think we had something like 70 iterations before we got to the beautiful simplicity that you'll see at the end. But we presented the latest version to the leadership team, and they said, not exactly, but it was a huge turning point because they said, here's what has to be in it. And they really, they took ownership for the theory of change as it existed then. So after we met with the leadership team, we had we'll call it a pre-presencing meeting, again with the large group of 100 people. We brought the theory of change that the leadership team had agreed on, and there were some really great conversations and some key issues that were tackled, and one was, where does family fit into this? What is the role of family? How do we bring them in? And so the theory of change was further modified and simplified. And then finally, and now I am at the bottom of the U in the co-presencing, the very next day after gathering the 100 people, we gathered the leadership team, and we did, for those of you who are familiar, you may not be, but there is an experience that is used extensively in Theory U work called 3D sculpting. And it's where a group of people can together sculpt the present environment, this present ecosystem, look at it from different perspectives, and then make shifts to the future that needs to happen. And with this group, we put an emphasis particularly on what are the shifts that need to be made, what are the strategies, and what is your role as individual and collective leaders to pull this off. And it was really a groundbreaking meeting in so many ways. And just to say just a couple of them, this was the first time we felt that the leaders really let down their hair and said, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do together. They spoke honestly about what it meant to pull something like this off in a conservative state and in a state within a country that is tremendously polarized in terms of politics. They had, early in the process, someone had talked about a shared budget, and now they were talking about the realities of what it would take to make a shared budget, and agreement that it was really, really necessary. And they talked about putting in a continued leadership structure that would help to realize the plan. And they also agreed that while they loved the concepts in the theory of change, that really complicated looking theory of change that Liz showed, that it needed to be way, way, way simpler. And so, behind the scenes, the core team and a few other key leaders took the essence, the meaning of the theory of change, and through great thinking and with the help of a designer, came up with a platform for change that is based around 4 pillars, and it's now called the Platform for Change. And these 4 pillars are language nutrition, access, creating a productive learning climate, and teacher preparation and effectiveness. So I'll just say a bit on each. Language nutrition is around the concept that language is as important for brain development in children as food is for their body development. That's the underlying thinking behind the Talk With Me Baby program that Liz talked about. The second is access, and this is that all children and families, regardless of their economic conditions or their physical conditions, we need to work towards making sure every child has access to the kind of experience and education that they need. The third was a productive learning climate, that we know that the culture of schools, of early childhood centers, of the homes is really important, critically important to kids developing the way they need to. And in Georgia, there is a work around PBIS, positive behavioral indicators. And so a third focus was on this productive learning climate. And finally, the fourth focus was teacher preparation and effectiveness. What is needed to be put into place to make sure every teacher, now remember Georgia is a state with a lot of rural areas hard to reach areas. So what would it take to make sure that every teacher, whether they be grade school or whether they be early childhood, have what they need to effectively give the children, the students, what they need? And just as a side note, one of the prototypes that's coming into a big project now that's come from that is something called Cox Campus Online. So it's an online program to transfer capacity to teachers throughout the state.
Maurice, we're getting a question here from someone about what do we mean by a theory of change?
So a theory of change is a map, basically, that lays out the thinking, the logic. First of all, lays out what is the goal, and then lays out the logic to how you're going to achieve the goal. So it lays out the strategies, first the goals, then the strategies, the people involved, the culture changes necessary. It is your kind of a roadmap or a shared platform for how are we going to achieve the goal that we set out to achieve.
So, for example, for the state of Georgia, at this point where we are today, these 4 pillars that you see, language, nutrition, access, productive learning climate, and teacher preparation, everyone in the state of Georgia, from the Chamber of Commerce to the schools to the early childhood folks, everyone's operating on the same theory of change with these same set of common pillars. A dimension of Georgia that we mentioned that it's politically conservative. Georgia is a state of 159 counties, and in Georgia it's a very anti-government state. So what we were told the minute we got there is whatever solution you come up with, it has to work for you can't assume that state government will impose it on the state of Georgia. Rather, it has to be something that every one of those 159 counties can take and make their own and apply it the way they want to apply it. So that's where we are with this theory of change that's on the screen right now.
And I think it's important to say that Ariane Weldon, who we introduced you to earlier, who is the program director for Get Georgia Reading, is by training an epidemiologist. And I think Liz and I think this is no small thing, because the approach that Ariane took and shared with the rest of us is that we need to take a population focus. We need to think of this as every child, not one child, but every child in Georgia. So an outcome of this and how it's being embedded now in the infrastructure of Georgia's education and healthcare, etc., is that there's a tremendous shift from a program focus. So we're going to have this initiative or that initiative, and they're all unconnected, disconnected, to a population focus where we really look at this from a systemic perspective and use these 4 pillars to guide both on the state and local level all the work so that we make sure we are reaching the entire population. A second big shift was the belief that our work is to create the conditions that will allow these changes to happen. So what do we have to put in place to make sure that the conditions are there for this change to happen? And so you can see that there are many, many, many changes going on. There are also these prototypes that Liz described and others. And every day we're hearing more and more about the changes that are going on in Georgia. Other states requesting information on how to build a coalition like this. Members of this grade level reading team were at the White House sharing about the Talk With Me Baby process, and this whole population focus and the change from a systemic level has become the driving force behind everything.
So if I can just say one more thing about this common agenda and theory of change. So the beauty of it is that it applies at the state level. I said it applies at the county level, applies at the school level, and it applies at the level of an individual child. So if you think about it, here's what this theory of change says. It says for any child, pick your own child or a child a baby. The first thing that they need is language nutrition. They need access to language from the time they are born well before they enter school, so that their brain forms the circuitry so that they can later learn to read. So just a mom or a dad or caring adults talking with them conversationally from the time they're a baby. That's the first thing. The second thing we're saying with the access one is that children need access to all of the surround that enables a child to have a healthy life. They need access to safe and high quality early childhood programs. They need access to physical exercise. So if you're a child in the United States and you live in a poor area and maybe urban Atlanta, you might not have access to physical exercise. That we're saying that's important. Access to using your body is part of the equation of reading on grade level. Access to dentistry. We've learned that the single most important reason, through the data analysis, we've learned that the single most important reason that children miss school and absences from school are a leading reason for children not reading on grade level. One of the reasons they miss school is for dental health problems, like not having good dental health and being kept out of school. It's shocking to me. So one of the prototypes actually is around teledentistry, where they're using the internet with dental technicians to give children access to dental health. And just everything, access is huge, a huge piece, but access to all of the things that many of us take for granted. And then productive learning climate is this idea that that same child, it's required, must be in classrooms where they feel supported, loved, seen as a human being, and where they can be curious, as opposed to a classroom where they're managed, told to be quiet, told to, mainly march in line, and often, especially for children who are at risk, given out-of-school suspension. So productive learning climate is huge in Georgia. And the last thing is they should have teachers who, we know that the magic, the special sauce of a quality learning experience is having great teachers and close relationships with those teachers. So that's sure. So that's that.
So just want to highlight a couple of things that we have learned through this process as being so critically important. When Liz was speaking, she showed the pictures of Comer and Ariane and Dr. Fitzgerald and Katrina. There are countless others. And without the leadership of these people, and we call them, with love in our hearts and a great affection and appreciation, these are the crazies. The crazies who are calling us, in the middle of the night and over the weekend, and who have in their heart this goal that they're just not letting it go and constantly thinking about what more can we do, what other connections can we make, who can we talk to, who else do we need. So without people like that, Liz and I say processes and everything is needed and wonderful, and without great and wise leadership, it's really hard to pull a change, this kind of huge change off. So we just want to emphasize and underline the importance of leadership in this work.
Also want to say that, if anybody has questions, feel free to send them in. Well, just a couple of other closing comments. We have had the chance recently to chat with people and say, hey, we're doing this presentation for the MOOC folks. What do you think? If you step back and say, what has the contribution of Theory U been to this work? Some of the things they said is, through the Theory U, Theory of Change work, we've been able to just change the conversation. It's a different conversation with different players. That's been a huge theme in what people said. The other thing that we didn't mention that's really important to mention, particularly for folks like us who use Theory U for strategic planning and for coalition building. One of the things that we say to people is when you are on the left side of the U, that's what we call co-initiating, co-sensing. When you're on the left side of the U, you don't make decisions. And for us, the left side of the U can be 5-6 months. So it's a long time of being inspired but not acting. And that's been very important for us because it's easy to get to superficial decisions because, the first burst of insight, everyone thinks, that's it, we got it. And a lot of our work has been in holding back that instinct to act and encouraging people to stay open, stay open, and really go even further in framing what the impactful change can be.
So the other thing I want to say is, and something else that Liz and I learned over this time is to not be afraid to use some of the scarier, for us anyway, parts of Theory U. So with these large groups of people, we brought in reflection and meditation, we brought in movement, we went to different settings so that we were in places where we could utilize the outside to use, the world and the environment. And in the beginning of doing this practice, we were a little nervous. So we've got the Commissioner of Public Health and we have the Chamber of Commerce person. And what are they going to think when we say, let's take a moment of silence and let's reflect and let's, just have quiet time and let's do a meditation together. And what we have found over and over again is that first of all, in these crazy times when people are so busy, people say, thank you, thank you, thank you, we needed this. And we are getting a lot of wisdom, not just from the left side of our brain, but from all of us, all of ourselves. And so people are really appreciative of that. Number two, we never said this, but it might be important to say that our background, Liz and I, is that for years before finding Theory U, we practiced many large group meeting, whole system meeting designs and facilitation. And so our work melds or uses these kinds of methods to help bring to life the work that we do with Theory U, and that what Theory U has done for our work is tremendously deepened the results and the sustainability of the results. And so it can be said really that Liz and I don't do a piece of work now that doesn't have Theory U as the framework for change. So we intentionally left about 5 minutes so that if anybody had questions or anything they wanted us to address, we wanted to make sure that we gave you time for your voice. So we'll pause for a moment, maybe in that same spirit of quiet and reflection, and look to your questions if there's anything else you'd like us to address. It's hard here without any feedback. We don't know if we were clear or if we overwhelmed. Any kind of, even if it's not questions, any kind of feedback would be really useful to us so that we know if we were helpful.
And to the person who's asking, can we access your presentation? Absolutely. We have been the beneficiary of a lot of people who have shared just very easily with us. And we happily share our stuff, so please, contact us, or we'll find a way to post it. Oh, can you put that back up?
Can you put that back up?
We see a question, but it kind of vanished. Not up there.
Lily, can you put that question back up? Press the chat button. Right there. Ah, fabulous.
Here's a question. I'll read it, Marie. You think about it.
Yep.
I am also a teacher and a former Montessori principal in a third world country. Teaching is one of my passions, though I am in the real estate field at this point in my life. Not long ago, I had a great quality conversation with Sir Ken Robinson, who states that education is killing creativity. My point would be, how can our educational system adopt a more dynamic rhythm that would be aligned with the rapid flow of life triggered by technology and by the world becoming smaller? Could it be that education systems and the ones who propose them need to be educated about the existing gap between the reality, the new human being, opposed to the old reality, an old-fashioned human being, and being both trapped in a rigid way in books and in curriculum?
So I'm going to do an advertisement here. So tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, Liz and I will be doing another case study, and that one is on a strategic plan for the Lower Merion School District, which is a suburban school district outside of Philadelphia. And the plan addresses all of that. It's a bold, innovative, different kind of plan that pretty much has received universal applause from the people within the community. So, let's put in an ad for anybody who can join tomorrow. And if not, these will all be on YouTube. So if you can't see it tomorrow, hopefully that you could see that another time. Press the chat button. More questions. We hear there are more questions coming in. Okay.
Absolutely, we'll make a copy. Oh, no. There's a question, has your theory of change run long enough that you've seen an impact on the prison statistics? No, it hasn't. Actually, the goal is every child reading by grade level in third grade in 2020. So the big milestone we're still heading to is that the third graders in 2020 are reading on grade level. So we haven't, had we have a while before the prison population.
There was another question here about how did we decide who would do the TED Talks? And really a lot of it was people who were interested in doing the TED Talks, but also we had a lens of what are the key areas that everybody needs to be on the same page about and educated about, and also what are the different perspectives. So we didn't say all of the TED Talks, but we had parents talking about their experience as a parent. We had someone from the English learning community talking about the English learner lens, because there's such a large percentage of English learners within Georgia that that absolutely had to be paid attention to. We mentioned the Commissioner of Public Health. We had the Commissioner of Early Child and Learning. We had someone from the Chamber. So it was really to get the whole picture so that when you were done, you were seeing not one piece of the elephant, but the whole elephant.
And just a little plug for the actual TED people, for those people who know TED Talks. They have guidelines on their website about what makes a good TED Talk. So we just used their guidelines to make, because it was very important that these not be boring talks. They had to be really energized, focused, crisp talks, and they were really incredible.
And for those of you who might be interested in them, there is a website, Get Georgia Reading, and I'm not sure if all of them are posted now, but they will be, and some of them are posted now. So there's some really, really interesting presentations that kind of add. Obviously, there's only so much we can share in an hour, so if you want more, they're online. And just to look at the Get Georgia Reading website in and of itself is something worthwhile. Any other questions? We have a couple of minutes left, or 1 minute left.
Did you present U theory to the team leaders during your initial dialogue? Yes, we always do. Sometimes we've done work where Theory U has been more in the background, but more often it's in the foreground. We don't like to talk too much about Theory U in the beginning because people aren't interested in the theory. They just want to know that we're going to help them get the results. But we always introduce parts of Theory U. Sometimes we'll start, we have a quote, for those of you into music, and you know Leonard Cohen, he's an 87-year-old musician, rock musician, and he has one song that we sometimes start out with. It's called Ring the Bells That Still Can Ring, Forget Your Perfect Offering, There's a Crack in Everything, That's How the Light Gets In. So we talk about that as a Theory U quote because we want to expose the cracks in our own hearts, the cracks in our systems, that's the way we can really confront the realities of the systems that we're working with. But we almost always begin with a little bit about Theory U, including open mind. We say that we're going to strategically use quiet in our work because everyone we work with is always so busy. And we say that while normally in strategic planning work or coalition building work, the primary data that you use is quantitative data, that we are going to use ourselves as instruments of change to intentionally access the open mind, the open heart, and the open will so that we can perceive the future that's emerging. So we want to learn from the future as opposed from the past. So we have a couple of slides or conversations we typically have at the very beginning, and then we weave we do not do some of our colleagues do like a 2-day Theory U capacity building workshop to start with, and then do whatever work is coming after. And we usually don't have the luxury of doing that. Usually people are getting together across a lot of sectors, and they don't have that kind of time. So we introduce a little bit of Theory U, the general framework, maybe we spend a half an hour, but then we're weaving it through everything we do.
And somebody asked a question about on your proposals. So it's important to say that in every proposal, pretty much every proposal that we do, there's about a page on Theory U where we talk about that Theory U will be the framework. We talk about, sometimes we talk about 4 levels of change, and if you want to get to deeper levels of change, this is the process. This is a process to get there. And when Liz mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that the Annie E. Casey Foundation said to us, we picked you because we learned something from your proposal, and yours was the only one that we did, that's why, because we educated about Theory. We are not afraid to talk about Theory U, and we're 2 white middle-aged women, and so it could be scary, but we have just learned how important it is to put that up front and center from the beginning.
And to continue on that theme of 2 white middle-aged women, we always talk about it just realistically. We talk about Otto because we love Otto, and also because it gives us credibility. MIT economist. We always say that because you can imagine some of the things we're asking people to do. They worry is this real work? The other thing to say is we do nothing just because it's fun.
Mm-mm.
Everything we do has a purpose of getting us to preparing people so that they can be instruments of change. The people who are parts of our vision teams, it's usually groups of 50, 60, 70 people, where everything we do is preparing them to be agents of change and to be able to sense the future that wants to emerge.
One more thing I think I mentioned, but I don't know that I emphasized it enough, is that we build a rhythm and ritual of meetings with the planning team and the core team or leadership team, so that we are, like every other week, have an hour phone call with leaders and planners of the work, so that we are absolutely in sync with the leaders. We don't walk into one meeting or one piece of work where the leaders don't know exactly what's going to happen, and that we're all agreed on that this is what we're going to be doing. And that we find invaluable. This rhythm and ritual and infrastructure, scaffolding behind what you see, is so tremendously important. We do, very detailed note-taking, project management note-taking, so that there's really a process underneath the work that we do.
Someone's asking if this evolved in a system that we were a part of, or if we were external facilitators. And we were we almost always are external facilitators. When we first began this work, we were very careful about maintaining our external role. And then the switch came, where it started with being trusted partners, where we said, no, you know what, we want to be a little more shoulder to shoulder with our clients. And now I would say that we're really careful about being of use. So if we take too strong a position on anything, we're no longer of use to the system, but we are very in it. We're very in it emotionally, we're very in it personally, and we become really parts of the social ecosystem. So I would say we ourselves have shifted our thinking about our own role, and I'll say also, just used to be too that we would talk about Theory U, and as facilitators and thinking partners with our clients, each of us personally has gone through our own Theory U process, and you see before you 2 people who have been through all sorts of emotional ups and downs, and going through, I think Otto talked last time about the eye of the needle and what we have to pass through in presencing. So we use lightly these terms, letting go and letting come, and it's been very, very deep, challenging, sometimes excruciating, often exhilarating process for us.
And you know the quote that the quality of the intervention is directly related to the interior condition of the intervener. And so, number one, we're constantly working on our interior. It's a work in progress, as I guess for every human being. It's a work in progress. And also, I was looking at the screen laughing, thinking, the two of us sitting together, and there's been a tremendous strength in having a partner to do this work. It's hard work. And so to be able to talk through and have shared experiences, and, one person will say, oh, I can't do this now, and the other person can. So it's no coincidence that there are two of us sitting here sharing this today.
I think it's about our time, so I think we got to sign off. But just to say that many, many people before us have been really super generous with us and lent their thinking and their tools and their skills and whatever. And we're happy to do that with others, whatever the heck you need. So don't hesitate.
And our website is www.insightpartners.com. We have, more stories on there about work, and we also have, there are ways to reach us if you want to continue the conversation. We'd be happy to do that.
Do you want to spell that?
What?
Insight Partners.
Oh, and Insight Partners is INSYTE Partners, all one word.
.com.
And our emails are Liz@ and Marie@ insightpartners.com, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
And that's the end of our very first Google Hangout on Air. Okay, thanks everybody.
Everybody have a good day.